Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And today I truly have a world-class expert, world-class based in London, on the topic of recruiting. He's not only in the business and been in the business, he's the curator of Recruiting Brainfood, a phenomenal piece of content weekly that you got to get your hands on if you hope to understand how to recruit people. He's also the CEO and founder of a technology software company that helps people recruit developers, which is going to be the key focus of our next 20 minutes. And with all that, welcome Hung Lee from Workshape.
Jeff, thank you very much for the intro. I'm delighted to be on the show.
It's a pleasure to have you. There are few experts that know more and track more about this space than you do. And so because your business, Workshape, is focused on recruiting developers, and that's probably the single most common question I get, how the heck do I find programmers and developers these days? So we're going to really focus on that. But before we get to that, 60 seconds, if you would, on just kind of Workshape and the business that you lead, and perhaps a little on Recruiting Brainfood, just so people understand your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Workshape is basically a technology recruiting product that helps companies recruit software engineers. But we understand the problem differently from a lot of other businesses out there. For us, we don't think the issue is discovery. We don't think it's that hard to find developers. The issue is developers have stopped paying attention to what recruiters have got to say.
Yeah, they're tuning out the noise, right?
They're absolutely they're overwhelmed by recruitment messaging.
Yeah.
Their only response is to white noise everything, which is why they're not paying attention to all of this outreach that recruiters are producing. So what Workshape is trying to do is to create a high signal, low noise environment for software engineers to conduct job discovery. Because we fundamentally believe software engineers care about job discovery. They're just terrified of signaling publicly in the market that that's the case.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, their inbox is dead and their phone's going to blow up.
I've literally heard of developers pulling off of LinkedIn and other resources because they're just fed up with it.
Jeff, you just have to do we could prove it right now. You just go to LinkedIn and you type in the phrase, "No recruiters, please," into the LinkedIn inbox, and you'll find pages and pages of mainly software developers literally graffitiing their profiles to the point to say, "Please don't talk to me."
Wow.
And that, to me, strikes me as a crisis. So what we try to do with Workshape is to insulate those developers from that experience.
So I'm a developer. I'm an expert in whatever language. I'll use your service so that I hear about great opportunities, but not all the noise.
Correct.
How is that filtration happening? How does that happen? Is this a matchmaking concept?
It's a matchmaking concept. It's also a text-free concept, and it's a search-free concept. So for us, the main problem with the noise is that people are too easily identified.
Yeah.
And if you give a recruiter a database to search, they're going to pull all the data out of that, and they're going to hit everyone with a mail merge.
Sure.
That's what I would do if I was a recruiter.
Sure.
This is what I would do. But that's not going to work for the highly skilled in demand, which of course are software engineers. So instead of that, what we do is we invite software developers onto our platform. We ask them one question, what it is that you'd like to mostly spend your time on.
Yeah.
And they tell us what it is in terms of a kind of a time over tasks interface. So
it's literally, I've seen it, and it's literally, how do you want to spend your day? It's not job title. It's not language. It's the actual activities. And a lot of people that don't work in development don't realize that, a software developer is not a software developer. There's different components. There's testing and debugging and architecting and all these different visual design, right? I don't know. Are there a certain number of these skills or categories?
Yeah, well, we've kind of isolated 10, which we think are fairly universal in engineering. Or at
so
least
I can almost map out for developer A, the 10 ways he or she spends their time, and developer B would be totally different.
That's exactly right. We wanted to get beyond the job title and beyond the resume and beyond the job description. Because if you do a simple textual analysis of it, you'll find that a lot of those things look very similar, even though they're actually different jobs.
Right.
And that's part of the problem in recruiting, is that we're using documentation that doesn't reflect the reality.
Right. And you're using job titles, and software developer, it doesn't tell you enough.
We did actually an experiment, because a lot of the developers do call themselves software engineer, but they turned out to actually design very different shapes.
Right.
And that taught us something really important, because it meant that when recruiters are doing searches, they typically search on job title as one of the key fields that they search on.
Right.
They'll be pulling in a whole bunch of people that are entirely unsuited to the job
Sure.
that they're recruiting for.
And they're missing people that are well suited.
Exactly right. So text-based searching itself. So fundamentally, Workshape's also an attack on text.
Yeah.
We don't think textual data is necessarily the best way.
By text, you're not referring to text messaging on a phone. You're referring to the text
words.
of a resume?
I'm talking about words.
Words in a resume or a LinkedIn profile.
Correct.
Yeah.
The written word
Yeah.
is part of the problem in recruiting.
Right.
And the reason why, and this sounds ridiculous because how can you ever describe things without written words? But the reason why, Jeff, is because the written word is ambiguous.
So, sure.
It's inherently ambiguous.
Sure.
And in fact, that's the reason why language works, because there is an element of, oh, did he or she really mean that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let that slide. This
Right.
person's probably okay. We need the ambiguity to have a society. But when it comes down to accurately matching people to opportunity, this becomes problematic. So we figured maybe there's a different way to describe what someone really wants to do.
Right.
And can we map that then to a job where a company describes also what you need this person to do?
Yeah,
and
it's literally a visual map. I've seen it.
That's exactly right.
If our listeners are interested, they can go to workshape.io, is it?
Workshape.io, yep.
And they can actually, see one of these maps and create one. So whether I'm using Workshape or not, if I'm hiring developers, or I should say just looking for developers.
Yep.
I understand you have now a database of developers who have completed this map. I get that. Whether I'm working with you or on my own, how do these days, 2019, how do I bring developers to the table or even begin engaging with them? Let's say I'm not full of crap. I have an amazing opportunity. It really, this is a real thing. But they're so skeptical, as you said. They've turned out all the noise that they wouldn't take my call or my mail merge email. How do I engage with them?
Okay, I'm going to say something here that is probably going to be tough to hear for a lot of your listeners, Jeff. Because the reality of it is you might not be able to do it in the time frame that you had imagined.
Right. So if it's just-in-time hiring, you're too late. You're screwed.
Absolutely. And if you're trying to convert this person on the back of an email or back of a call, it's not going to happen.
Like trying to convert a customer to buy a $50,000 car in one email. You need you need the baby steps and different touches and messages over time and a test drive and et cetera.
To recruit software engineers effectively in 2019, you need to have a long-term strategy to build relationships with that community. That means dedicating resource to supporting the ecosystem, to engaging with people without demanding a call to action. You can't be saying to them, hey, listen, I've got this amazing job, which you may well have.
Right.
But you can't then
start with that. You can't start with, hey, let's get married. You got to start with, hey, would you like to have coffee?
Exactly. And it's not, maybe not even that. You've just simply got to have a touch point. And one thing that I think that this will actually change the shape of who's an effective recruiter for this skill set.
It's going from sales to marketing, right?
Inbound marketing, but also the type of recruiter you are. So for instance, if you're a generalist recruiter, like I was back in my day, where you're recruiting for multiple different types of job families that don't have any relationship with each other. And you're generally more just in time as a result of that, because you can't spend time building these long-term relationships, because you might only be hiring that one role. That person is not going to be effective in recruiting for a software engineer.
So you believe do you believe overall this recruitment model of the future is back to a specialist, an ultra specialist, or are you saying only in developers do you need that mindset?
I would say for any highly skilled in demand vertical, you need to have a specialist, or the company. If you're a third-party agency, you need to be set up as a specialist agency, and deal only with that group of people, because the conversation you have today may result in a placement or a hire 9 months down the line. But you cannot predict when that thing is going to happen, because that candidate is not hire ready. They are busy doing what they're doing. You've interrupted their day. They're not going to take your call. They're not going to look at your proposition. They're not going to even do the due diligence to think whether your job is actually better than theirs. Why would they do that? If they were ever active on the market, they could generate opportunities within a week of being there. So it's kind of like, psychologists would call it an abundance mindset. And when you've got a group of people that have abundance mindset, then literally you can't sell to them.
Right.
You need to simply be prominent and present with them.
When they are ready to look.
When they're ready, you need to be
yeah.
the first guy to call. Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about turning the funnel upside down. You're talking about brand awareness, employer brand awareness, so they at least know of you, have heard of you.
Right.
Which is multiple touch points in marketing. You know, a lot of people say it's 7 or 9 or 11 touches before someone even knows your name.
Right.
So let's say we buy into all that, right? Because I happen to buy into that. In 2019, what steps do I take? Is this content driven? Am I providing them with content? Am I providing them with community to connect with other candidates, with each other? Does it not matter? I can just try all these different things. What do you anticipate, or what are you seeing is working for the people that are starting to get this?
Yeah, well, I think you just need to help them. You know, if you're providing helpful stuff, it could be content, could be community, could be whatever, then generally speaking, you've started the relationship in the right way, because you've had a positive impact on this person. Then it's simply a matter of persistence and keeping going, and so on and so forth. Now, again, this is not something that the company has to be set up to do this, because it means that you're asking your recruiters to spend a lot of time that isn't transactional recruiting.
Yeah.
If you're going to say to them, hey, listen, I need you to fill these 4 jobs every month, okay, maybe that's not the kind of company that's going to succeed in this way. Right. Don't get me wrong. I think you can still hard sell it. You can still be the type of company.
It's a lot harder, but if time is short, that's really your only option. You just got to kiss a lot of frogs.
There's another way to do it. I mean, in the UK, one of the techniques of very successful recruitment agencies is to actually operate with the candidate first and try and market them in to companies. Again, slightly different.
When you're at a 3.7% unemployment rate, you can do that. Things will change, right? The pendulum will always swing back the other direction eventually. But right now, yeah, if you have a developer who's skilled and interested, you can line up 10 interviews tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, you know, I think what is happening in the software engineering recruitment space is that you're going to have on one side companies that are doing the inbound marketing play and really focus on building long-term relationships.
Yeah.
And then on the other polarity, you've got these faster moving people who are going to isolate one candidate, activate them in the sense that, okay, I've got this person interested in other opportunities, and then simply go and speak to companies and try and get this guy in. Get interviews. So I think the middle guy, you know, the big middle group of recruitment agents that generally we're trying to be nice guys and trying to do transactional recruiting, they're not going to play in this field. You know, they're done.
Yep, they're toast, right?
Yep,
got it. Who's doing well at this? You know, let's set aside the companies that have huge resources in brand awareness and are attractive to developers. So let's set aside Google and Microsoft and Accenture and Salesforce. Yeah. Let's set those aside because we don't work at those companies. So we are a 5 or a 50 or a 500 or a 5,000 person company that doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the brand awareness, doesn't have the time. When you look at companies that seem to be doing well anyway, what do they have in common? What are they doing?
So let's be clear that we're talking about companies that are recruiting internally, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about agencies. I'm talking about employers.
Yeah, employers. So I think the companies that understand that they can't compete with the big boys, so to speak, in terms of salary, in terms of prestige, et cetera, et cetera. The common things that I see from them is that firstly, they fundamentally understand what is a good candidate for them.
Right.
One of the biggest errors that kind of really reduce the overall labor market is this concept of prestige hiring. So in other words, we perceive someone to be great because they've worked at X.
Sure. They came from Google, therefore they must be a genius and a perfect fit for my role, when in fact they might flop.
In fact, that person working for Google may be a reason why they will flop.
Right, because they never worked at a 10-person company or whatever.
Exactly. So, but this is a classic error that we make because we're not sure about what quality control is in our own business. Therefore, we look for previous employers to have done the due diligence for us. Yeah. He or she must have been great because she worked at Facebook, etc. That's the mentality. Now, the companies that I think have managed to get over that and understand what it is that they like to see in their developers and produce their kind of bit of introspection, understand what performs well in their company, they suddenly can open up a group of people that perhaps were ignored by the wider market because everyone's chasing these prestige names. So number one is a company that understand what is good for them.
Yeah.
Because that's a different picture.
It's like a self-awareness, right?
Exactly right. What suits this business? The second thing is that the organizations that can accrue this type of goodwill typically have a way of contributing to the wider ecosystem that gives them a lot of touch points. So in other words, if you're a great open source contributor as a business, or if you're a company that supports events or gets your developers to speak and does all of those things that, ostensibly doesn't generate ROI for your company, but still contributes to the community, that just spreads the brand in a very subtle way, and people will discover you in a manner where you can't hard sell that brand in. They'll discover you because you did something great for the community.
What if I'm not a technology company per se? I happen to think we're all technology companies now, but let's say I'm a bank or a financial services company or a healthcare company. The list is endless.
Yep.
And I don't hire so many developers that I have the, that ability to build brand within where they live. What are there other best practices, or should I surrender and use agencies or headhunters that do focus on that market?
Honestly speaking, I think I wouldn't say surrender, but one of the considerations that any business needs to make when they're thinking about building internal recruitment capacity is the role that I'm looking to build this capacity in a strategically important position?
Yeah.
And do I always recruit for it?
Just map out how many hires you're going to make in 2019 by function. If I'm going to hire 500 sales reps and 6 developers, put your efforts on being best of breed in hiring sales reps and outsource the development piece.
Exactly right. If you're not repeat hiring software engineers, I don't think there's much point in telling your recruitment team to try and do that.
Let's be specific. When you say repeat hiring, are you talking 2 or 10 or 100? How do you think about where to draw the line and say, you know what, this isn't even worth us trying to be good at. Let's find an outside expert.
You know what? It's probably not a number, but it's probably a ratio.
Okay, well, let's do that way.
So you use the example of sales, for instance. You have a sales organization. You know what? You should build internal recruitment capacity for sales because you're always going to be recruiting for those people. The question you ask yourself is, would you recruit this person if you didn't have a job but you encountered a great candidate?
Would you make room for them?
Yeah. Would you make room for? If the answer is yes, then you strategically have an interest there. If the answer is no, there's no space on the bus.
Right.
Then okay, you don't have that. You need to then outsource it, or you need to find another solution to deliver it. Because in the hard to hire market, you probably won't be able to get it done because it does require you to invest a huge amount of effort and energy.
You'll be spinning your wheels.
You'd be trying to do something and you'd be outcompeted by companies that do have a strategic interest in building that capacity.
Yeah.
So there's almost no point, or at least it's high risk to do something like that. You're better off finding another solution, whether it's outsourcing it with a third party or getting other developers in. There's other ways in which you could recruit these people in.
But you're going to have to be creative about it and going forward.
Right.
So before we wrap up, let's shift to a totally different piece of this, which is, let's say, God willing, we're able to bring developer candidates to the door.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found, since your company, Workshape, is in the space of recruiting developers and software engineers? What is the best practice these days for assessing them? So I am considering a candidate for developer. Somehow they're interested in me and my company.
Mm-hmm.
How do I assess them in a way that is accurate? Should I care about their personality? Should I just focus on their coding skills? How do I assess their coding skills? What is the best practice today?
So this is a huge topic of conversation, because if you ever jump onto a developer forum, one of the most critical things that they will put forward is how companies actually assess their skills.
Yeah.
They fundamentally don't respect a lot of the ways in which companies do it.
Yeah. And they have a right to feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the most important thing here is how have you encountered that candidate actually might determine how you assess them. So for instance, I'm a critic of of a company having a universal or standardized assessment procedure. Now, I know that sounds
you said you're an advocate or not an advocate?
I'm a critic of it.
Critic. Okay. Yep. So
Absolutely.
not one size fits all across my company.
No, because it should be contextual based on your first contact. If, for instance, someone has applied for my job, if it is a developer, by miracle, some developer has applied for my job and he looks decent on resume, you know what? Because he or she has made the first move, you can definitely assess this person, send them a technical test, and the person's going to fulfill and do it.
If they're interested enough in spending the time, but yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that they've applied and they've come forward, they've come to us.
Yeah, they're more active. They're more willing to engage and spend the time.
Yep. Yeah, they've signaled to me that's the case. However, if I've headhunted this person who didn't know me from Adam, who wasn't activated in the market, but suddenly we had a decent conversation.
Yeah.
You know what? If I then send that person a 6-hour test, he ain't going to complete that.
They're going to tell you to go pound sand.
Right. He's not going to do it. So you've got to think about where was my first contact with this? Is this a candidate I've attracted to my business? If so, then I can probably put the assessment a little bit closer to the front of the funnel. If it's the case, I've gone to that person. You've got to kick the assessment way back to the narrow end of the funnel.
You need to seek so am I getting this right? Same steps, different sequence.
Correct. You basically got to think of the recruitment funnel as modular, and you've got to kind of move the blocks in different ways depending on when this person has encountered. Like, for instance, let's say I'm headhunting a high demand candidate. Somehow I've got this person interested in their chatting. You know what? My CEO would probably be at the end of a traditional recruiting process. I would speak to my CEO and say, hey, listen, I need you close to the front here because I need you to really pitch this guy and get it into the process.
What I think you're saying is meet the candidate where they are in the process, right?
Or rather, understand that not everyone is at the same mental state with vis-a-vis your job. Not everyone's an applicant, basically.
And if you're not sure how to get your arms around this, go sit down with your head of marketing and talk about the buying process and consideration process. When someone goes through buying a product, they go from awareness to considering to what is the choices to commitment. There's all these steps. Call them whatever you want. Very same, because the candidate is buying the job, is buying your company.
You know what? We as recruiters need to do that a lot more. But unfortunately, there are these barriers in business, and also in recruiters' defense, we also get this inordinate pressure to do things with speed. Where are those candidates? Where is the pipeline? Where is this?
If you're relying on just-in-time hiring, you are toast. It's exactly where you started this conversation, Hung.
Yeah, you're just not going to do it.
Right.
I had an unpleasant conversation yesterday about a company who said exactly the same question. How do I hire these software engineers? Because we obviously are going through a political scenario whereby
slightly.
in 60 days, we're going to leave the EU. Now, that actually has a tremendously negative effect in terms of hiring software engineers from UK-based companies. Reason why? We're going to cut off a labor market of 400 million people and reduce down to 60 million people. And in UK tech startup, at least 50% of the engineers in these companies are not UK citizens. Predominantly they're from the EU. So you're cutting off a huge amount of talent.
The supply is gone.
Huge amount of talent is gone, right? So this lady came to me and said, hey, we're recruiting developers. Isn't anyone else there? How is Brexit going to affect us? And I was just talking to her about this. And I just said, listen, you need to seriously consider the prospect that you may not get it done.
You better start having contingency plans, right?
Right. You need to plan for not succeeding here because the reality of it is a lot of companies in this circumstance are going to fail to recruit these software engineers. No matter what best practice, no matter how great you do it, you simply are not going to get it done. So you need to ask yourself the question, okay, what happens if we don't hire these folks? What is the alternate solution? You might need to put a dev team in a different country. You might need to offshore some of the dev work. You may need to get a partner to build some of the
tighter the labor market becomes, you got to be more creative.
100%.
Hung, you are one of the few experts on this stuff. I very much appreciate your perspective. How can people learn more about Workshape or subscribe to your amazing free content about Brainfood? Tell us how to do that.
Yeah, so anybody can sign into, there's an application process for Workshape, so we accept internal recruiters only for that. Developers obviously can sign in. Workshape.io, check that out if you're a software engineer or you're hiring for software engineers. And if you're interested in recruiting in general, then please do check out recruitingbrainfood.com. That's a weekly newsletter that I curate and I send to the recruitment community.
I subscribe and it's phenomenal. Thank you so much for making the time. We very much appreciate it. I'd love to have you back.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's been a massive pleasure.